Good evening and welcome to Hello It's Us, Perspectives on Inclusion. This program is dedicated to educating the general public about issues that are important to people with disabilities. And we operate under the premise that these issues are important to the community in general because people with disabilities are an integral part of the community. This program is brought to you through a collaboration between the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, our friends at Uptown Bill's Coffee Shop, and the good people here at Public Access TV. My name is Mike Hoenig. I work for the University of Iowa Center for Disabilities and Development, and I serve as one of the show's co-hosts. Keith?
I'm the other co-host, Keith Ruff. I am retired, but I do advocate for many disability issues.
Yes, you do. That's a good thing.
For a long time.
Yeah. 72, well, maybe not 72 years.
71 years in counting.
Right. Well, we're delighted to bring you part two in our 2017 Iowa legislative session wrap-up. We have a full house here. We have Senator Bob Dvorsky here, representing Senate District 37. He's from Coralville. We have Representative Dave Jacoby, House District 74 from Iowa City. We have Senator Joe Bolkcom, representing Senate District 43 in Iowa City. Representative Amy Nielsen, representing House District 77 from North Liberty. And Representative Mary Mascher, representing House District 86 from Iowa City. Thanks all of you for coming back for session two here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to just jump right into some content here. And we had a great discussion. I hope all of you were able to watch our first episode recapping the session where we got into the voter ID stuff. And that was it's a really important issue, voting in general, for all of us and certainly for people with disabilities. What we'd like to do now is we know that we have a good local audience here, and we'd like to just ask any of you to respond to talk about some of the issues that you heard a lot about from your constituents that either did pass or did not pass or perhaps passed with watered down or without all the provisions that you were advocating for. Does anybody want to just jump in? And I know that we had talked a little bit, maybe Senator Bolkcom, I know that you've been a longtime advocate of the medical cannabis bills and legislation, so I'll just pick on you.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Let me just give a quick summary. So 3 years ago we passed a bill that provided, that said people with epilepsy could get access to, or could legally go to another state and get access to cannabis oil, CBD oil, that is low in THC but effective in treating epilepsy. And that was 3 years ago. And we thought that was a really good thing at the time, and it was, but 3 years have passed and only 39 Iowans have been able to legally get a card and go to another state, get their medicine, get it home. And the bill said basically we wouldn't arrest you or your family or take your house if you did that. The problem with that bill was that you had to break other state laws and break federal laws to get your medicine. So the issue here in Iowa is we got to be able to produce the medicine here and dispense the medicine here. So this year, the Senate, we got back on the issue, and we had a good, strong bill, comprehensive bill, come out of the Senate on a strong bipartisan vote, 45 to 5. That was really a bill that was modeled after what's working in the 29 other states that have moved ahead of us, that have allowed the whole plant to be available, have multiple conditions that we know it's effective with, have a medical advisory board to advise on how to make the program better, and had in-state manufacturing of the medicine and then dispensing it. So we passed that, and that bill went over the House, and it was put in a drawer and it died. And the Republicans in the House worked to put together a bill that essentially would make it really still difficult for chronically sick people with disabilities and diseases, many diseases that you just don't get better from, make it really hard for them to get the medicine, because in the House bill, they basically maintained the same medicine, 3% less or less THC, as you look at the 9 conditions in the House bill and the bill that actually passed, that's going to be signed by the governor, 8 of the 9 conditions won't be impacted by the medicine that's prescribed in the bill.
Ooh.
So it's like saying you have cancer and here's some baby aspirin. So that's probably the major flaw of the bill. And what we have in the House is a bunch of our House Republicans who crafted this bill that I have this view that nobody's going to get high, that THC is bad, and what we know is that THC is in the having the whole plant available. The therapeutic contribution of the plant is you got to have the whole plant for certain conditions. And the bill also says that we're only going to change that if the legislature says it's okay to change it. So I think that people feel like it's maybe a little baby step. It's going to provide for production of the medicine in Iowa, even though the medicine's going to be deficient. And we're going to have 5 dispensaries available. I think on a business side, there's concern that manufacturers, if you only have a couple hundred patients and you have a couple $1 million worth of outlay to build a facility, there's just the economy of scales and economics of it that people are uncertain whether the program will work based on that. So I'll stop with that. It's maybe a baby step forward that we've actually going to allow for production in Iowa. Unfortunately, I think the advertising about helping all these different conditions is false advertising, and hopefully we'll get back on this issue next year and keep working on it.
Are those dispensaries, are they regional?
Are the dispensaries?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's more than 800 pharmacies in Iowa.
Okay.
If you think about access to medicine,
Okay.
having 5 locations is just, it's not enough. The Senate bill only had 12, but 5 is, you're going to have to drive hundreds of miles round trip to get your medicine.
Wow.
And so it's not very practical in that way. And it's a cash program. There's no insurance pays for this. Medicaid doesn't pay for it. So that's another consideration. What are the costs going to be, and then this added cost of having only 5 dispensaries.
And I think a key thing that Joe mentioned is it passed the Senate 45 to 5. And so the Republican majority there is not exactly liberal by any sense, but I think they understand the science a little better and wanted to push this forward. The problem we have in the House is we have a number of people who firmly believe that this would be the first drug of choice. In other words, not understanding that 99.9% of the people that would be reaching for this to help with chronic illness or rheumatoid arthritis, it wouldn't be their first drug. It would be probably their 15th or in their 5th year of trying to find medication that helped them with their ailments, and especially with parents of children that were there at the Capitol. This isn't their first rodeo with the child trying to find an answer to helping their children. It's one in a long line, and they're saying nothing pharmaceutical has helped yet over the years. We are reaching for this because it has proven results. So it's heartbreaking to see people with their families there. It's heartbreaking to see a Republican representative tell the family to move. And that's what happened a year ago, as someone said, we'll just move to Colorado. Well, that's not how we want to keep young families in Iowa. So it's a little frustrating. If you can tell that my voice is, look at the science, let medical professionals help make that decision, because no offense to anyone, we ain't that smart. And we can get help by medical professionals and families affected.
Well, thanks for that. That's a real helpful update, and it does sound like that there's a lot of work yet to be done. And so I wondered if we could shift a little bit too and talk a little bit about the state budget, which we could probably spend the rest of our time on. You know, I know that we have a significant shortfall again. I just kind of went through, some of you may know that there's a great publication out there called InfoNet. It's a publication that's produced I believe it's funded through the DD Council and ID Action, and they put a lot of information out there about disability issues. And so I was kind of looking through the state budget, and it so there's certainly the impact of Medicaid, but there the shortfall in how people are actually going to get services, and then some of the other programs that we hold near and dear, like Voc Rehab, that's going to take a big hit, and that's helping people go to work, and so there are a number of other centers for independent living, which Senator Dvorsky, I know that you were our champion when we first got funding available. The Entrepreneurs with Disabilities, I mean, things that you would think would be issues that would be of interest to support by the Republican Party, and yet we're seeing these cuts. So maybe we'll just kind of throw it open a little bit and see what
the worst one I think I've seen is going after the Iowa Flood Center. I mean, of all the places in the world to cut, when we've had all these horrendous floods in Cedar Rapids in this area and all across the state, so what do they want to cut? Funding for the Iowa Flood Center, which is a nationally recognized center. And finally, after they started that, the Flood Center cranked up and got a lot of people to email and call and everything. And so they're getting $1.2 million, whereas last time they got $1.5 million. But $1 million of that comes out of the base of the University of Iowa. So that has to be one of the worst ideas I've ever heard of in the state. A nationally known center that really helps everyone across the state keeping track of water in all sorts of different ways. And they could document how they helped Cedar Rapids prepare for the last flood they had up there, and really saved them enormous amounts of money and time and effort. And they're cutting that. They also cut funding for the Leopold Center, Sustainable Agriculture at Iowa State. I don't know if he signed that now or not, but that is also ridiculous, where you actually had good science there that you could use in sustainable agriculture across the state, and they cut that. They took the funding from that there to go into the nutrient, what's it called?
Research Center.
Research Center to fund that. So they're looking at all these centers that really do well, and they took the Iowa Energy Center, and they essentially took the parts of that and put that over at the Department of Economic Development or Economic Development Authority. And they also looked at cutting back on another famous center here at the University of Iowa, CGAR, the Center for Regional and Global Environmental Change, and that's going to sunset in 5 years. So all these centers sponsored by essentially regents that are sort of world-class centers that are producing tremendous research. I think CGAR, they get about $700,000 under the funding, and they've got, what, 23 million, something like that, they produced over the years in research. So it makes no sense whatsoever, and it's some sort of attack on the regents and attack on science in general, I think. So that was really, really disturbing. This was the worst session I've ever had in 30 plus years in Des Moines, where people just attacking all sorts of things. I mean, things that really make Iowa move forward. It's like we're regressing back to, I don't know, caveman or something. I mean, it's just amazing that anything that sort of moved forward, they went after that. I mean, the cut in the regions, I think, is $30 million cut in regions, and they're cutting community colleges and even private schools. So it's amazing.
It is amazing. We're having a discussion today and about policy in terms of the. I assume that some of you are familiar with the Medicaid Home and Community-Based Services program here in Iowa. That people can instead of being funded to live in an institution or a large congregate facility, can take those dollars and live with supports in their community. It's a wonderful program, and unfortunately, the waiting list for that program just continues to grow and grow, and now we see more deep cuts apparently on the horizon, within Medicaid. Not even thinking about what may happen after with the news today of the American Health Care Act being passed, but there's a concern that I keep hearing more and more among disability advocates that when you said regressive. Senator Dvorsky made me think about, the regressive policy that people are concerned that people are going to end up being moved back out of the community living situations back into large scale, large group facilities again. So I don't know if anybody has heard that concern among disability advocates or families about just what kinds of services are going to be available.
I've heard that from a couple families, and it goes back to the budget. The budget we dealt with for fiscal year 18 is the total amount of dollars is not less than we've dealt with in previous years. So there was more money, not as the increase wasn't what we thought it would be, or the revenue estimating conference thought it would be, which are 3 people working with the governor to set those numbers. When we're looking at the shortfall in Medicaid, it's because we're spending $300 million a year to backfill commercial property taxes. We are taking income tax and sales tax, the largest 2 revenue streams for the state budget, and using the dollars we all pay in, and instead of that going to Medicaid to help families or to schools, we're using that money to backfill a commercial property tax reduction. And that, just so the people know, is there's no sunset on that. That's in perpetuity. My favorite legal term that I really don't know what it means, but I hear it's a long time. But this $300 million a year is what we're paying out. In fact, and I think all of us fought it this year, $131 million was taken out of the rainy day funds.
Yeah.
And that was money that was shuffled over to backfill the commercial property taxes, not to backfill schools, not to backfill Medicaid families. So it's a little disheartening, but the budget isn't struggling. It's the priorities that we have are struggling. And I know both Keith and you asked for something positive. Civil forfeitures. We made a positive move this year in a bipartisan way to end some of the civil forfeitures. There, I get something positive. So,
I have a positive one. One of the worst cuts I think we looked at is funding for domestic violence programs and sexual assault programs. And that was going to be cut 46%. It only got cut 26%. But to go after those programs that they've changed over the last few years that really service people all across the state, to cut those 26% when everything else in the justice system budget was maybe being cut 5-10%. It just seems like it's a war on women and a war on children. I don't understand that sort of thing. I mean, that's their priorities. They had the money, they just chose to do that.
I really wonder if the people that are making the cuts realize that someday they might need the help we're getting now.
Yeah.
And if it isn't there, what in the world are they going to do?
It's a good question, Keith, and I kind of addressed that broadly on the floor a couple times, and the answer is that they all live in their own little bubble of white privilege.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
nobody can look outside of that, and nobody can understand that there are things that they don't experience in their own life that other people experience. And that is the problem.
I mean, we're all getting older.
They don't seem to understand that someday it could affect them.
Yeah,
They don't seem to connect the dots that way, Keith, and that's been part of the problem. We look at all of the things that were cut in human services, and those are things that are going to affect every single person in our area who benefits from those programs. But I look at the education cuts and I see children who won't be able to go to preschool and daycare and won't have that available to them. I see students at the University of Iowa and our community colleges and our private colleges that will be paying a lot more in tuition and will have to either delay their graduation dates or go to work full-time or part-time to be able to even make, to have the ability to graduate. And so I look at all of those cuts and how they affect each and every person that we come in contact, and I know those people are in their areas too. they came out to their forums this year more than any time in the past. And so they're hearing from constituents and they're seeing there's pressure there, but they've got to keep it up. I mean, people have got to start holding people accountable for their votes and letting them know that they are paying attention.
One of the things that I think Representative Mascher, that you point out, well, all of you have in your own way, but I mean, I think you said it extremely well, is that it's about thinking about the people and how it impacts them. And Representative Nielsen, you mentioned that too, that people are operating from a base of white privilege and not thinking about what kind of impact these. I remember a situation a few years ago where a legislator I think was in a farm accident or something and was temporarily used a wheelchair, and there was a fire drill or something where he had a very, very difficult time getting out of the Capitol. Yeah. And after that, I think his attitude did change a little bit about physical access, but it's pretty sad that that it has to get to that level before it should be, as elected officials, it should be second nature.
And I don't okay, I just recently went on Medicaid, and they're complaining about expenses. I can give one that's ridiculous. A caseworker has to come to my house once a month. That's okay, I don't mind. But we don't talk about anything. That's a waste of money, paying her to come and go.
Well, that's the new privatized system with these three insurance companies.
Yeah.
I hope with the Governor Branstad moving on to China that we can strike up a conversation with the new governor, Reynolds,
I hope so,
to try and sit down and take a serious look at what we've done to the Medicaid program, because the executive branch, she is going to inherit a disaster, and we need to work with providers, the hospitals, community-based providers, the mental health system, and begin to figure out how we can transition this system to a better place, because people are losing money, consumers aren't getting what they need, the budget's going to be, these companies are coming at us for hundreds of millions and more in funds that we don't have. So I hope there's maybe an opportunity with the new governor that she'll be willing to listen to some of the concerns people have and make some changes in the program.
I mean, I don't mind her coming, but what we're talking about can be done over the phone.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
It's not efficient.
Yeah.
One of the things that, and Senator Bolkcom could speak to this, is that directly affects us here that hasn't maybe before, because we're sort of isolated and insulated here in Johnson County, and some of these things don't affect us. But first of all, the $30 million cut to the University of Iowa, that's going to affect us a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But the MCO's not paying UHC. How much is it?
They're
cut
down,
there?
the university's down like $25 million in payments. They've had more than 700 denials, which according to the university, it's 10 times more denials than like the next insurer they deal with. Of course, they get denials on things they submit claims for, but they've had 700 with
Wow.
Medicaid this year, and it's like 10 times more than any denial. So they are hurting. I mean, it's cutting into basically the cushion that they need to operate in not being paid this $25 million. So it was kind of extraordinary for Jean Robillard to come to the Board of Regents meeting last month in Council Bluffs and lay it out and say this is a disaster for the University of Iowa hospitals and clinics.
So explain to me, when a claim like that is denied, do they, I should know this, but do they have to have pre-approval? So in other words, somebody seeks treatment at the university and then the claim is denied, so the person isn't treated, or is it?
The university has had to have dozens of people on the phone with these three companies from the beginning. Some of it they have to get pre-authorized, some care they have to get pre-authorized, but a number of the examples were these serious people that are seriously ill. It's pretty clear they need the treatment, life and death kinds of conditions, And there shouldn't be an argument about whether it's going to be covered or not.
Right.
And they've been kind of astonished by some of the rejected claims. And it could be, they didn't have the exact word that needed to be there or some coding issue, but these are the University of Iowa's hospitals. They have the first-class billing operation. They know what they're doing. 700 claims to be denied is just an extraordinary rate, and they're kind of flabbergasted with the system that they have to deal with. And they see folks that other hospitals say, we don't do that, we can't help you, you need to go to Iowa City. So it is really the last resort for some rather expensive care in some cases that, we want UIHC to continue to be that place where people get that kind of care. But we got to pay them.
Well, absolutely. And the other part of it is, those of us, I've got a chronic condition that is pretty expensive. I have cancer that requires a pretty expensive immunotherapy, and I have had a couple situations where there have been those, a code has been entered incorrectly or whatever, but I'm in a position where I have the experience because of the field I'm in, that I can call them up and say, hey, what's the problem? And usually we're able to resolve it. There are a lot of people who that's just not a part of their life experience, or they've not, ever either been sick or never had to challenge it. Maybe they're living in a rural area and, well, I can't call Iowa City. I mean, that's the. So I think there's not only the problem with the university's payment, but I'm sure this is creating an incredible amount of stress on patients as well.
Patients in the 117 other hospitals in the state are all, and community providers like systems, and it's up and down the line from small to medium to large healthcare providers that are being impacted. And by the way, these providers are all the same providers that provide care to everybody else in the state. And they just don't exclusively take care of people on Medicaid, they take care of all of us.
Yes.
And when you undermine that system broadly, it's bad for the whole healthcare enterprise in our state.
We're, believe it or not, we're running a little short on time, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we spent a little time talking about, several of you have mentioned throughout our discussions the importance of advocacy and speaking out. And I guess I would really like for you to each share your perspectives on what's the best, what are some of the suggestions you have for, if you want to talk about how people can contact you directly, if there are forums going on, what are some suggestions that you have for people that, I think the time to get involved is now, right? They don't want to wait until the holidays or something. They need to start getting fired up like you all are right now. So tell us how you would recommend that they do that or could do that.
I think it's best, obviously we all look at our emails and identify those as one of the ways people can communicate, but there are forums throughout the session, and then we've got one coming up with the elderly community on, is it Monday? Monday at 2 o'clock in Coralville at the public library in the lower level. So that'd be another place and time that people could come and ask questions and find out our assessment of the session and how things went. But we are all listed in the phone book, and I think you're always welcome to call and give us your concerns or what issues you're dealing with, and we try to help anybody who gives us a call. So I would encourage people to do that. I don't know if folks have other things that they would suggest as well, but
if you have friends or family that live in a different part of the state that have Republican representation, urge them to contact their representatives, because calling us, mostly you're preaching to the choir, and we wish we could do something more. It's hearing from those constituents that's going to help. So reach out to people in every corner of the state.
Go ahead.
Feel free to preach to us, because we love hearing from you. I mean, it's great
sure.
hearing from, whether we agree or disagree, and as was stated, emails, family and friends and other areas, but I try to set aside 1 to 2 lunch hours each week to meet with people if they have an individual issue or just want to get together and discuss the session or what it's looking like for the fall elections. And we've only been out 2 weeks, and I've met with 4 people so far, but I try to keep a half hour open over lunch to meet with people that may want to do that too if they're able to.
Great.
So I think we're fairly accessible. One of the things that's going to happen, we'll have one more year of the legislative session, but the 2018 elections are coming up, and on the Democratic side anyway, there's a number of people running for governor, and they're out there already. Today, one of our fellow state senators, Nate Bolton, announced that he's running. Previously, Representative Todd Pritchard had announced, so there's just 2 people from the legislature. There's a number of other people running also. So they'll be going all over the state. So I think it's a really good opportunity for people to come to see them and listen to them and talk to them and get ideas from them. So you're going to have 8, 9 people running for governor all across the state, and it's going to be an interesting field. So I think it's kind of an exciting time, and that's one way people can get involved is to go to those events and participate.
And then you can find us in the grocery store and any place downtown at the Ped Mall, and we're always willing and open to talking to folks there too. I always plan on, if I'm going to go get something at the grocery store, it's going to be at least an hour or 2 as opposed to a 10-minute run. So those are things that we're always more than willing to do as well.
And one of the tools I use is to go on, if you do want to email, you can go to legis.iowa.gov and click on your legislators, and there they are. Well, I am very sorry that we have run out of time again. I want to thank our elected officials here for taking the time out to come back and join us for a second show. And
Thank you.
We'll look forward to doing this
Thanks,
again
Bill.
in this November or December, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss. So thanks all of you out there for watching, and thanks to our legislators for making this such an exciting and interesting and not a little bit frustrating, but realistic view of what's going on out there.
Have a good week out there.